My sister-in-law called me a gold digger when my mother-in-law left me $500,000 instead of her son, until everyone heard the recording of him saying he couldn't wait for her to die. The funeral reception was still going when Tabitha cornered me by the dessert table. "You manipulated her," she spat. "You stole what belonged to my brother." I'd been married to her brother for 8 years. 8 years of watching him treat his mother like an ATM. When she called needing help with groceries, he'd complain about gas money. When she mentioned feeling lonely, he'd say he was too busy. I was the one driving mom to appointments, cooking her meals when she got too weak, and sitting beside her hospital bed during her final weeks. She left him the house, the car, and half her savings, I said quietly. "But you got more," Tabitha shrieked. "You got the life insurance. You poisoned her against her own son." My husband appeared, gripping my shoulder too tight. "Let's not make a scene." I pulled away and headed to the parking lot. In my car, I opened my phone and pulled up the voice memo Mom had asked me to record 3 weeks before she died. "I'm leaving you more money than my son," her weak voice played. "Not because I don't love him, but because I know what he is." I heard him talking to Tabitha last month. They didn't know I was awake. He said he couldn't wait for me to die so he could pay off his gambling debts with my money. Her voice broke. "Promise me you'll use this to start over. Get away from him." My husband knocked on my window. "As my wife, legally half that money is mine." I rolled down the window. "We need to talk about what your mother recorded." His expression shifted. Fear. "What recording?" I pressed play. His voice filled the car. "I can't wait for her to die. Once we get that life insurance, we're set. Tabitha can open her boutique and I can pay off the bookies." Tabitha's laugh in the background. "How much longer do you think the old bat has?" My husband's face went white. Tabitha stood frozen on the sidewalk. "Mom kept her phone recording after her diagnosis," I said. "She recorded everything, including when you told her to refuse treatment to save everyone money, including when you searched her medicine cabinet for pills to sell." His hand slammed my car. "You can't prove that. I have 47 recordings, all time-stamped, all saved to the cloud. Mom's lawyer has copies. So does her financial advisor. And tomorrow morning, so will every family member who called me a gold digger." "Where are you going?" "Away from you. I'm filing for divorce Monday. And that inheritance went into a trust with conditions. One being you get nothing if we divorce due to your conduct. We can work this out. We're family. Your mother was family, and you counted days until her funeral." I pulled out of the parking lot. Through my mirror, I saw Tabitha rushing toward him. The whole family had heard that recording through my open window. I drove 3 hours before stopping at a hotel. My phone exploded with messages. From his sister, his cousins, his father. But one message stood out. From Mom's lawyer. "There's something else in the will. Something your husband doesn't know about yet. Call me immediately." My hands trembled as I dialed. Whatever Mom had planned, it wasn't over. I couldn't fit what happens next in this short video. Watch the rest down below. The lawyer answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for your call." Richard Chen had been Mom's attorney for 30 years. He'd handled her divorce from my father-in-law, her business deals, and apparently her revenge. "What else is in the will?" I asked. "Your mother-in-law established 3 additional trusts. One for you. 2 others I'll explain when we meet. Can you be at my office tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock? I'm 3 hours away." "Perfect. That means you're far from him. Stay away. The restraining order will be filed by 8 a.m. "Restraining order?" "Your mother-in-law documented everything, including photos of bruises on your arms from when he grabbed you, including your medical records from the ER visit you said was from falling downstairs. She knew you'd never press charges yourself." My throat tightened. I'd forgotten about that night 2 years ago. Mom had shown up at the hospital after I called her instead of my husband. She'd sat with me for 6 hours while they x-rayed my ribs. She never said anything about it afterward, just started recording. "I'll be there at 9, I said. That night, I barely slept. My phone kept buzzing. My husband, his sister, his father, his uncle, each message more desperate than the last. "We can fix this. Don't be hasty. Think about our life together. You're making a huge mistake." At 2 a.m., my father-in-law called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "My son is a fool," he said, "but she was my wife for 34 years. I have a right to know what's in that will." "You divorced her." "Community property laws still apply in some cases. My lawyer says I might have grounds to contest." "Contest all you want." Her lawyer seems pretty confident. He was quiet for a moment. "She left you something else, didn't she? Something besides money." I hung up. At 8:47 a.m., I walked into Richard Chen's office downtown. The building was old with marble floors and brass fixtures. His secretary offered coffee, which I accepted. My hands needed something to hold. Richard appeared at 9 exactly. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind eyes I remembered from Mom's funeral planning sessions. But today, those eyes held something else. Satisfaction. "Your mother-in-law was one of the most meticulous clients I've ever had," he said, closing his office door. "She began planning this 18 months ago, right after she was diagnosed." He opened a thick folder. Inside were documents, photos, and what looked like bank statements. "The $500,000 from the life insurance is yours, as you know. It's in a trust that your husband cannot touch, regardless of marriage laws. She set that up 3 years ago and named you as the irrevocable beneficiary. Even if you'd stayed married, he couldn't access it." 3 years ago, I repeated. "Before she got sick, she knew who her son was long before the cancer. The diagnosis just gave her clarity about timing." He pulled out another document. "This is the deed to her mother's property in Vermont. 40 acres and a renovated farmhouse. It's been in a separate trust since before she married your father-in-law. He has no claim. She's leaving it to you." My vision blurred. Mom had shown me photos of that property, her mother's land, where she'd spent summers as a girl. She'd always said it was her happy place. "There's more." Richard continued. Your mother-in-law owned a 30% stake in her ex-husband's company. He didn't know she'd never signed the papers releasing her interest when they divorced. She'd been collecting dividends quietly for years. That stake is now yours, worth approximately $1.2 million. I couldn't breathe. How did he not know? She had a very good lawyer. Richard smiled slightly. Me. During their divorce, his attorney drafted the papers wrong. They assumed she'd signed. She never corrected them. Every quarter, dividends went into an offshore account. She reinvested them. Now that portfolio is worth $3.7 million. Also yours. That's impossible. Your father-in-law built his wealth on her family's connections. He used her trust fund to start his business. She always resented it. This was her way of taking back what was hers. Richard pulled out a photo. Mom at 25, beautiful and young, standing next to a man I recognized as my father-in-law. But in the photo, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She told me something when we first met, Richard said. She said, I married a man who saw me as a bank. I want to make sure my son doesn't inherit that trait. When you married him, she hoped you'd change him. When you didn't, she made other plans. To give me everything? No, to give you freedom. He pushed a final document across his desk. This is a purchase offer for your father-in-law's company shares. A conglomerate wants to buy the whole business. If the sale goes through, your 30% stake becomes worth $8.9 million. But here's the interesting part. You get to vote on whether the sale happens. I don't understand. Your father-in-law owns 51%, but he needs 75% approval from all shareholders to sell. Your mother-in-law's 30% puts you in the position of kingmaker. He needs your vote. And if I say no, he's stuck with a company that's struggling. His debts are significant. Without this sale, he'll likely have to file bankruptcy within 2 years. He has debts? Richard smiled. Your husband isn't the only gambler in the family. Your father-in-law has been borrowing against the company for years. Poor investments. Bad deals. He needs this sale desperately. My phone buzzed. Another message from my father-in-law. We need to talk about the will. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. He knows, I said. I filed the paperwork this morning. He received notice an hour ago. Richard handed me a pen. You have 90 days to decide whether to approve the sale. During that time, he'll do everything possible to pressure you. Your mother-in-law anticipated that. He pulled out another document. This is a harassment restraining order. Against your husband, his sister, and his father. If any of them contact you, they face legal consequences. The order is already active. I stared at the papers covering Richard's desk. My entire life was changing, and Mom had orchestrated it from her deathbed. Why did she trust me with this? Because in 8 years, you never asked her for anything. You never treated her like an ATM. You just loved her. Richard's eyes softened. She told me you reminded her of who she used to be, before she made the mistake of marrying a man who only saw her value in dollars. I signed the restraining order paperwork. What happens now? Now you disappear for a while. I've arranged a place for you to stay. A friend's cabin in Montana. No one knows about it. You take time to think about what you want. The trust distributions will begin next month. I'll handle everything legally. Can they contest the will? They'll try. Your father-in-law has already called 3 times this morning. But your mother-in-law's will is ironclad. I made sure of that. Every recording, every photo, every piece of evidence is documented and legal. She built a case that would take years to unravel. And frankly, they don't have years. Because of the company debts. Exactly. Time is not on their side. I left Richard's office at 11 a.m. with a new phone, new bank cards, and an address in Montana. My old phone I left on his desk. He'd have it wiped and destroyed. On the drive to Montana, I stopped at a small diner for lunch. The waitress was friendly, asking where I was headed. I realized I could say anything, be anyone. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't somebody's wife or daughter-in-law. I was just myself. Visiting family, I lied easily. She smiled. Safe travels. The cabin was 3 hours north of Billings, hidden in pine trees with a view of mountains. It had 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and absolute silence. No neighbors for 5 miles. The owner had left supplies including firewood and groceries. I spent the first week sleeping, my body finally releasing 8 years of tension. I'd wake up panicking, thinking I needed to be somewhere, do something, take care of someone. Then I'd remember. I was free. The second week, I started cooking actual meals. Not the elaborate dinners my husband demanded, but simple things I enjoyed. Pasta with vegetables, grilled cheese sandwiches, soup from scratch. I ate slowly, tasting everything. Richard called on day 12. Your father-in-law made an offer. He'll drop all legal challenges if you approve the sale and accept $2 million cash. He keeps the rest. That's not how math works. My 30% is worth $8.9 million if the sale happens. I told him that. He said you don't understand business. That your mother-in-law was confused when she made these arrangements. That he's being generous. What did you say? I told him my client would consider his offer and respond within 30 days. I don't need 30 days. The answer is no. Are you certain? That's a lot of money to walk away from. I'm not walking away from it. I'm just not letting him profit from stealing my mother-in-law's trust fund 30 years ago. Richard chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. I have another option. The company making the purchase offer? They're willing to buy just your 30% for $4.2 million. You'd get your money immediately, and your father-in-law would be stuck in a partnership with a conglomerate that will slowly squeeze him out. How is that better than blocking the full sale? Because the conglomerate wants the company. They'll get it eventually. This way you get paid now and you get to watch him squirm for years as they dismantle everything he built. It was petty, vindictive, exactly what Mom would have wanted. Let's do it. I'll have papers drawn up. They'll need your signature by the end of the month. I spent the rest of March hiking. The Montana wilderness was brutal and beautiful. I'd never been outdoorsy before. My husband hated camping, hated anything that couldn't be controlled or scheduled. But out here, nothing was controlled. Weather changed without warning. Trails disappeared. You just had to adapt. On my 31st day in Montana, I drove into town for supplies. The grocery store was small, the kind where everyone knew everyone. I was picking through apples when I heard a familiar voice. "Excuse me, do you know if these are local?" I turned. Tabitha stood 3 feet away holding a bag of potatoes. My blood went cold. How had she found me? Then she looked directly at me and smiled. "Sorry, I'm new around here, just moved from Idaho." She didn't recognize me. I'd cut my hair short and dyed it darker. Lost 15 pounds from hiking and stress. No makeup, different clothes, new glasses. "I think those are from Washington," I said carefully. "Thanks." She moved past me toward the dairy section. I abandoned my cart and left immediately. At the cabin, I called Richard. "Tabitha is in Montana, same town." "That's impossible." The restraining order. She didn't recognize me. She's just here. Maybe coincidence? There are no coincidences. Give me 2 hours. He called back 90 minutes later. "Tabitha moved to Montana 3 weeks ago. Filed paperwork for a boutique in that exact town. She bought the commercial space with a loan from your father-in-law. She's hunting me. It appears so. They don't know you're there specifically, but they've been buying property in small towns across 5 states, hedging their bets. Tabitha's probably been told to keep her eyes open. I need to leave. I have somewhere else. Oregon coast. More remote. I'll text you the address." I packed in 20 minutes. Left the cabin keys under the mat as instructed and drove southwest through the night. The Oregon location was a converted lighthouse keeper's cottage, perched on cliffs overlooking the Pacific. The nearest town was 40 minutes away. I arrived at dawn and slept for 14 hours straight. April became May. Richard called weekly with updates. The conglomerate's purchase of my shares was progressing. My father-in-law had tried to block it legally, claiming undue influence. The judge dismissed it. My husband had filed for legal separation, trying to claim he'd been faithful and I'd abandoned him. Richard sent him the recordings. He withdrew the filing. "They're getting desperate," Richard said during our May 15th call. "Your father-in-law offered $5 million for your shares directly. Still no. He's also threatened to sue you for alienation of affection against his ex-wife. That's not even a real thing in this context." "No, but he's throwing everything at the wall hoping something sticks. His company is bleeding money. The potential buyers leaked word that a sale might happen, so his vendors are demanding immediate payment. His credit is maxed. He needs this resolved." "How long until my share sale completes?" 2 weeks? Maybe 3. On May 23rd, the money hit my account, $4.2 million. After taxes and legal fees, I'd clear $3.1 million. Combined with the other trusts, the Vermont property, and the life insurance, I had approximately $7.8 million in total assets. I was 34 years old, and I never had to work again. Richard called that evening. "It's done. The conglomerate now owns 30%. They've already started making moves. Your father-in-law just learned they're auditing the books. I'd say he has 6 months before they find enough irregularities to force him out." "Good. There's something else. Your mother-in-law left you a letter. She made me promise not to give it to you until the money was secured. I'm overnighting it to your Oregon address." The letter arrived 2 days later in a thick envelope. I recognized Mom's handwriting on the front. "For my daughter. Open when you're ready to begin." I waited until sunset, sitting on the cliff with the ocean crashing below. The letter was dated 3 weeks before she died. "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, then Richard has done his job and you're finally free. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything before I died. I needed you to look surprised when the will was read. I needed everyone to believe you were as shocked as they were. The truth is, I've been planning this since you married my son. I knew what he was. I knew what his father was. I raised one and married the other. I take full responsibility for not intervening sooner. But I watched you for 8 years. I watched you try to change him, try to love him into being a better person. I watched you sacrifice pieces of yourself trying to fit into a family that never deserved you. And I realized you'd never leave on your own. You're too loyal, too hopeful. So I had to do it for you. Everything I've given you isn't just money. It's permission. Permission to start over. Permission to be selfish. Permission to walk away from people who take and never give. The Vermont property was where I was happiest. Before marriage, before children, before compromise. I want you to know that feeling of being exactly who you are without apologizing. Don't let my son guilt you. Don't let his father manipulate you. They'll say you owe them something because of our family bond. But family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. And they never showed up for anything except to take. You showed up. For me. For 8 years, you showed up when my own son couldn't be bothered. That's worth more than money could ever buy. Build a life you love. Fall in love with someone who treasures you. Be reckless and foolish and gloriously happy. And when you doubt yourself, remember that I saw you. Really saw you. And I chose you. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully. Below it, in the envelope, was a photo. Mom and me from 2 Christmases ago, both of us laughing at something my husband had said about hating holiday music. I remembered that moment. He'd been trying to be funny, but it came out mean. Mom had caught my eye and rolled hers. We'd spent the rest of the afternoon giggling like teenagers every time he complained. It was the last Christmas before her diagnosis. I stayed in Oregon through June, long enough to watch the gray whales migrate. Long enough to learn the local coffee shop barista's name and preferred order. Long enough to feel like maybe I could be happy again. On July 2nd, I drove to Vermont. The property was more beautiful than photos suggested. 40 acres of rolling meadows, dense forest, and a creek that ran year-round. The farmhouse had been renovated 5 years earlier with wide windows, modern appliances, and a wraparound porch. Mom's furniture was still inside, covered in sheets. I pulled them off slowly, revealing pieces I remembered from childhood visits to her place. A rocking chair she'd nursed my husband in, a dining table where we'd played cards during her chemo treatments, a bookshelf filled with paperbacks she'd read and reread, I spent July settling in. I painted walls, planted a garden, and fixed the sagging porch steps. Physical work that left me exhausted and satisfied. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, an older woman named Dorothy, who brought me zucchini bread and didn't ask too many questions. "You're the one who inherited from Patricia," she said on her 3rd visit. "You knew Mom?" "Knew her grandmother better. Wonderful woman. Patricia used to come up here every summer with her mother, before she married that awful man." Dorothy shook her head. "We were all sad when she stopped visiting, but I heard she never sold the place. Waited 40 years to come back. She left it to me. Smart woman. She knew you'd appreciate it." Dorothy looked around the property. "Place needs love, but you seem like the type who's got love to give." August was hot. I swam in the creek and read every book on Mom's shelves. Some had notes in the margins. Her thoughts, her questions, her reactions. It was like having conversations with her ghost. One book, a novel about divorce and second chances, had a note on the last page. "It's never too late to start over. Remember that." She'd written it in red ink, recent handwriting. After her diagnosis, she'd known exactly what she was doing. On August 15th, Richard called. "Your divorce is final. Judge signed off this morning. Your ex-husband tried one last time to contest the prenuptial agreement. Failed. You're officially done. That's it? That's it. You're a free woman. Congratulations." I walked out to the porch and sat in Mom's rocking chair. The sun was setting, painting the mountains purple and gold. Somewhere in New York, my ex-husband was receiving papers that ended our marriage. Somewhere in Florida, his father was watching his company crumble. Somewhere in Montana, his sister's boutique was probably failing because she'd chosen a town with no foot traffic just to hunt me. And I was here, in Vermont, on land that had been in my mother-in-law's family for 4 generations, breathing clean air and watching fireflies emerge from the grass. Dorothy appeared on the path, carrying what looked like pie. "Thought you might need celebrating food," she said. "Heard your divorce went through. Small-town gossip travels fast. How did you—" "Patricia's lawyer used to summer here as a boy. Richard Chen. His grandmother was friends with Patricia's mother. He might have mentioned something when he called my nephew about the property survey last week." I laughed. Of course Richard had connections here. Mom had thought of everything. "Thank you," I said, accepting the pie. "You planning to stay?" Dorothy asked. "Or is this just temporary?" "I don't know yet." "Well, if you decide to stay, town could use a young person. Median age around here is 67. We're dying off," she smiled. "Patricia always said she'd retire here. Build an artist studio, take up painting again. Never got the chance." "She painted?" "Beautiful work. Abstract stuff. Lots of color. Her mother had a whole collection. Might still be in the attic here somewhere." After Dorothy left, I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. It was dusty and full of boxes, but in the back corner, I found a trunk. Inside were paintings. 20, maybe 30 of them. All signed P. Morrison, Mom's maiden name. They were gorgeous. Swirling blues and greens, violent reds and oranges, peaceful purples and pinks. Each one felt like an emotion made visible. Joy, rage, sorrow, hope. On the back of one painting, she'd written, "Marriage, age 24, before I forgot who I was." I carried them all downstairs and lined them against the living room walls. They transformed the space from a farmhouse into a gallery, into a memorial, into a reminder. September brought cool weather and the start of leaf season. Tourists drove through town to see the foliage, stopping at the local diner and gift shops. Dorothy suggested I open the property for farm stays. "People pay good money for authentic rural experiences," she said. "You've got the land, the house, the story. Patricia's place has a nice ring." I'd never considered running a business, but I had time and money and a house too big for one person. By October, I'd renovated the barn into a guest cottage. 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette, and huge windows overlooking the creek. I listed it online as Patricia's Place, a Vermont retreat, with photos of the property and a description about finding peace in the mountains. The first booking came within a week. A woman from Boston who just left her husband. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, looking exhausted and defeated. I showed her the cottage, the trails, the creek. I didn't mention my own story, just gave her space. On Sunday, when she was leaving, she hugged me. "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed silence." "I know the feeling," I said. The bookings increased. Most guests were women, though not all. Some were running from something. Some were running toward something. Some were just tired and needed rest. I never asked questions, just provided clean spaces, good coffee, and trails to walk. By November, I was fully booked through the following spring. The income wasn't necessary. I had more money than I'd ever need, but it felt good to build something, to create a place that might help others the way Vermont had helped me. Richard called on November 10th. "Your father-in-law's company filed for bankruptcy. The conglomerate is buying the assets for cents on the dollar. He'll be lucky to walk away with anything." And my ex, working as a salesman at a car dealership. Tabitha's boutique closed last month. They're selling the Montana property at a loss. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Does this ever end? What do you mean? The anger. The need to know they're suffering. Richard was quiet. "Your mother-in-law asked me the same thing 6 months before she died, after she'd set everything up but before she'd gotten too sick to change her mind." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's about making sure they can't hurt you anymore. She'd spent 34 years being hurt. She wanted to ensure you wouldn't spend 34 more. I'm free now, so why do I still check your updates? Because freedom takes practice. You're still learning how to live without looking over your shoulder." He was right. I'd been free for 7 months, but I still woke up sometimes expecting to hear my ex's voice demanding breakfast or criticizing my clothes. Still caught myself apologizing for taking up space. "How long does it take?" I asked. "To stop feeling like their prisoner?" "Everyone's different, but But you're building something new here. That helps. December brought snow, 3 feet in the first storm, then another 2 feet the following week. The property was completely isolated, roads impassable for days. But I had firewood, food, and silence. On Christmas Eve, Dorothy showed up on snowshoes with a thermos of spiked hot chocolate. Figured you might be lonely. I'm okay, I said, and I meant it. You know what Patricia told me once? Dorothy settled into the rocking chair. She said the hardest part about leaving her husband wasn't the fear of being alone. It was the fear of realizing she preferred alone. When did she tell you that? Last summer. She came up here one weekend while she could still drive. Sat right where you're sitting and said she'd wasted her life trying to fix a man who didn't want fixing. Said if she had it to do over, she'd have left at 25 instead of 68. She never told me she'd been up here. She was planning something. Wouldn't tell me what. Just said she was making sure her daughter-in-law would be okay. Dorothy sipped her chocolate. Guess now I know what she meant. She called me her daughter-in-law. No, honey. She called you her daughter. There's a difference. I started crying. Big, ugly sobs that I'd been holding back for months. For years. For my entire marriage to a man who'd never loved me. For the mother-in-law who'd loved me more than her own son. Dorothy held me while I fell apart. When I finally stopped, she said, Patricia knew you'd cry eventually. She told me to tell you something if I ever saw it happen. What? She said, tell her crying means she's letting go. And letting go means there's room for something better. That night, alone in the farmhouse, I pulled out Mom's letter again. Read it 3 times. Then I wrote my own letter. To myself. To the woman I'd been 8 years ago. Walking down the aisle toward a man who'd only seen my usefulness. I wrote about everything I'd learned. About love that costs everything versus love that gives everything. About family you're born into versus family you choose. About inheritance that comes with strings versus inheritance that cuts you free. When I finished, I folded it and put it in the same envelope as Mom's letter. Someday, maybe, I'd give it to someone else who needed permission to start over. New Year's Eve, I drove into town for the community celebration. Small towns go all out for holidays, and this one was no exception. The diner had strung lights everywhere, the church was hosting a potluck, and the fire department was planning midnight fireworks. I'd avoided most social events since moving here, but something about entering a new year felt significant, like I should mark it somehow. The diner was packed. Dorothy waved me over to her table, where she sat with 3 other women around her age. They introduced themselves as the remaining original residents, women who'd been born here and never left. We're a dying breed, one named Helen said cheerfully, but we're stubborn. They asked about the farm stays, about my plans for the property, about whether I'd eventually sell and move somewhere warmer. Normal questions. Nothing about my past or my divorce or my inheritance. It was refreshing. At 11:45, everyone moved outside for the fireworks. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees, but no one seemed to care. Someone started singing, badly, and someone else joined in. At midnight, the sky exploded with color. Not professional fireworks. These were clearly the fire department's homemade contraptions. But they were beautiful in their imperfection. Dorothy raised her thermos. To New Year's and new beginnings. And to women who leave legacies, Helen added, looking at me. I raised my own cup of cider. To second chances. The fireworks lasted another 10 minutes before fizzling out. The crowd dispersed slowly, people heading home through the snow. I was walking toward my truck when I heard someone call my name. My real name. The one I'd been born with. Not the married name I'd shed in the divorce. I turned. A man around my age stood near the church steps, looking uncertain. I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else, I said automatically. No, I don't. He stepped closer. You're Patricia Morrison's daughter-in-law. Ex-daughter-in-law now, I guess. I'm Liam. I worked at her estate planning firm 5 years ago. I helped organize some of her trust documents. My guard went up immediately. What do you want? Nothing. He looked embarrassed. I wanted to say thank you. Patricia was one of the kindest clients I ever worked with. When I told her I was thinking about leaving the firm to start my own practice, she referred 3 of her friends to me, helped me get started. She did that for a lot of people. I heard what happened, with her son and the will. I wanted you to know that everyone at the firm was glad when we heard you got the inheritance. Patricia used to talk about you during our meetings. She said you were the only good thing her son ever did. I didn't know what to say. Anyway, I'm up here for the week staying with my brother. If you need anything, legal advice, financial planning, or just someone to shovel your driveway, let me know. He handed me a business card. Happy New Year. He walked away before I could respond. I looked at the card. Liam Foster, estate planning attorney, a Boston address and phone number. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way Liam had said Mom used to talk about me, like it was something she did regularly, like I was someone worth mentioning. I'd spent 8 years feeling invisible in my marriage. My husband never introduced me as anything except my wife. No name, no personality, no value beyond my relationship to him. His family had been the same. I was just the woman who'd married in, the one who served food at holidays and drove people to airports. But Mom had seen me, had talked about me, had planned an entire financial empire transfer just to set me free. I pulled out my laptop and searched for Liam Foster's firm. It was small but successful, with good reviews and an impressive client list. He specialized in helping people protect assets from abusive family members. Of course he did. Mom would have loved that. On January 3rd, I called his number. Liam Foster. This is Patricia Morrison's daughter-in-law from New Year's Eve. Hey, I'm glad you called. I have a question about trusts and estate planning. Sure, what's up? If I wanted to set up something similar to what Patricia did, a way to help other women leave bad marriages, how would I do that? He was quiet for a moment. That's a beautiful idea. Are you thinking a nonprofit? Or private trust distributions? I don't know. I just know I have more money than I'll ever need, and Mom gave it to me for a specific reason. I want to pay that forward. Can we meet? This conversation deserves more than a phone call. We met at the diner 3 days later. Liam had driven up from Boston with a folder full of information about different charitable structures. He'd done research, pulled examples, and outlined pros and cons of each approach. You could establish a foundation that provides emergency funds to women leaving abusive relationships, he said, or a trust that pays for legal fees and temporary housing, or a grant program for women starting businesses after divorce. Why not all of it? That's ambitious, but possible. You'd need a solid structure, good oversight, and clear criteria. We talked for 3 hours. By the end, we'd sketched out a plan for what we called the Morrison Trust, named after Mom's maiden name. It would provide financial support, legal assistance, and housing grants to women escaping dangerous marriages. This could help hundreds of people, Liam said, looking at our notes. That's the idea. Can I ask why you're doing this? Beyond wanting to honor Patricia, I thought about the 8 years I'd spent believing I couldn't leave, about the recordings Mom had made because she knew I'd never have the courage to document the abuse myself, about the inheritance that had literally bought my freedom, because I got lucky. I said finally, I had someone looking out for me. Most women don't. Liam nodded slowly. I'd like to help with this. Pro bono. Patricia helped me get started. This feels like the right way to pay her back. You're sure? Completely. We spent January and February building the Morrison Trust's legal foundation. Liam handled the paperwork while I worked with local domestic violence organizations to understand what women needed most. The answers were consistent: immediate cash, safe housing, and legal representation. By March, we'd funded our first 3 cases: a woman in Ohio who needed money to break her lease and move states, a woman in Texas who needed legal fees for a custody battle, a woman in Maine who needed first and last month's rent for an apartment her ex couldn't find. Each case felt like saving a life, like giving someone what Mom had given me: options. On March 15th, Richard called. I heard about your foundation. Patricia would be proud. It was her money. Seemed right to use it her way. There's something I didn't tell you. From the will. My stomach dropped. What? Patricia left video messages. 5 of them. She made me promise not to give them to you until certain milestones happen. You just hit milestone 2. What was milestone 2? Using the inheritance to help others. She predicted you would. She had a whole timeline mapped out. Milestone 1 was getting through the first year. Milestone 2 was this. Milestone 3, he paused. Well, we'll get there when we get there. Where are these videos? I'm uploading them to a private server. You'll have access in an hour. I waited by my laptop like a kid on Christmas morning. When the email finally arrived, I clicked through to the secure site. 5 video files, each labeled with a number and a date. I clicked on video 1. Mom's face filled the screen. She was in her bedroom at home, looking thinner than I remembered, but smiling. This was during treatment, probably around month 4. Hi, sweetheart, she said to the camera. If you're watching this, you made it through the first year. I'm so proud of you. I know it wasn't easy. Leaving my son, facing down my ex-husband, starting over. But you did it. You're free now. She shifted in her chair. I want to tell you something I never said while I was alive. When my son brought you home the first time, I knew you were too good for him. I saw it immediately. You were kind and genuine and so desperate to be loved. He was selfish and manipulative and looking for someone to manage his life. She wiped her eyes. I should have warned you, should have told you what he was. But I was a coward. I'd spent 34 years in a bad marriage. I didn't know how to tell someone else to avoid the same mistake. Mom, I whispered to the screen. So instead, I decided to fix it the only way I knew how. By making sure you'd have the resources to leave when you were ready. I started planning 3 years ago. Every time you drove me to the grocery store while my son complained about gas money, I added to your trust. Every time you sat with me during chemo while he was at the casino, I documented it. Every time you chose me over him, I knew I'd made the right choice. She leaned closer to the camera. You were the daughter I never had. And I want you to know that everything I did, because you deserved better. You deserved freedom. You deserved wealth. You deserved a life where you weren't constantly giving pieces of yourself away to people who never appreciated you. I hope you're building that life now. I hope you're happy. I hope you're learning that you don't have to earn love. It should just be given freely without conditions. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'll be watching over you. Not in a creepy way, she laughed. In a proud mom way. The video ended. I sat crying for 20 minutes before I could click on video 2. This one was dated 2 weeks before she died. Mom looked worse, thinner, paler, obviously in pain, but her eyes were fierce. Milestone 2, she said. You're helping others. I knew you would. It's who you are. Even when you were married to my son, you couldn't stop trying to save people. Neighbors, friends, strangers. You have the biggest heart. Now you have the resources to match it. The Morrison Trust, or whatever you ended up calling it, is your legacy, not mine. I just provided the seed money. You're the one who'll grow it into something beautiful. She coughed, recovered. I want to tell you about my grandmother, the one who owned the Vermont property. She left her husband in 1952, unheard of back then. She took her daughter, my mother, and moved to Vermont with nothing, built a life from scratch, raised my mom alone, never remarried. Everyone called her crazy, said she was selfish, said she'd ruined her daughter's life by depriving her of a father. But my mother always said her mom was the bravest person she'd ever known. She showed her that leaving was possible, that women didn't have to accept mistreatment. I didn't have my grandmother's courage. I stayed married for appearances, for security, for all the wrong reasons. But I gave you what she gave my mother, permission to be brave. Mom smiled through tears. I hope you're using it. I hope you're living loudly. I hope you wake up every morning grateful to be alone instead of afraid to be alone. And I hope you'll eventually find someone who deserves you. Someone who sees your value without you having to prove it. But if you don't, that's okay too. You're complete exactly as you are. The video ended with her blowing a kiss to the camera. I couldn't watch the other 3 videos. Not yet. I needed time to process. I walked out to the porch and sat in the rocking chair. The March wind was cold, but the sun was bright. Spring was coming. The creek was running high with snowmelt, and I could hear birds returning from wherever they'd spent winter. Everything was changing, including me. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. 4th Morrison Trust case just approved. Woman in Oregon. She says she's been trying to leave for 12 years. Thanks to you, she can finally go. I looked out at the mountains, at the property Mom had fought to keep for 40 years, at the life I was building from the ashes of my marriage. Thanks to us, I texted back. Thanks to Mom. That night, I pulled out Mom's paintings again, hung them properly throughout the house. In the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. Each one a reminder that she'd been more than someone's wife or mother. She'd been an artist, a fighter, a woman who'd lost herself and spent 40 years finding pieces. I fell asleep thinking about the 3 remaining videos, wondering what other milestones Mom had predicted. By April, the Morrison Trust had helped 18 women. The numbers felt small compared to the need. Thousands of women were trapped in bad marriages, unable to leave because of money. But 18 was 18. 18 women who now had options. Liam and I met monthly to review cases. We'd established clear criteria: immediate physical danger, no financial resources, and a concrete plan for what they'd do after leaving. We weren't interested in funding revenge or spite. We wanted to help women who were truly stuck. We're getting more applications than we can fund, Liam said during our April meeting. Even with your initial $2 million donation, we'll run out by summer. I'll add another $1 million. That's not sustainable. We need recurring donations. Other wealthy people who believe in the cause. He was right. The Morrison Trust couldn't run on my inheritance alone. We needed to build something that would survive beyond me. I'll reach out to some foundations, Liam continued. And we should consider a gala or fundraising event. Get publicity for the cause. The idea of publicity made my stomach turn. I'd spent the past year hiding from my ex-husband's family, building a quiet life in Vermont. Going public meant exposure. Let me think about it, I said. That night, I clicked on video 3. Mom was in a hospital bed this time, IV in her arm, but still smiling. Milestone 3, she said. You've built something bigger than yourself. I'm so proud. But now comes the hard part. Letting others in. Letting people see what you're doing. Being visible. She knew. Of course she knew. I spent my whole life hiding. Hiding my art. Hiding my unhappiness. Hiding my plans to leave. I thought if I made myself small enough, I'd be safe. But safety isn't the same as living. She adjusted her hospital gown. You've been hiding too. Different reasons, but same result. You're building this beautiful thing in Vermont, but you're doing it in the shadows. Afraid they'll find you. Afraid they'll ruin it. But here's what I learned at the end. They already ruined enough. Don't let them ruin your future too. Be loud. Be visible. Let people see the Morrison Trust and know what it stands for. Let my son and his father and his sister see that their cruelty led to something good. She leaned toward the camera. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's building something so beautiful they can't touch it. Something that will exist long after they're gone. Something that proves they didn't break you. Be visible, sweetheart. Let them see you thriving. The video ended. I sat with her words for 3 days before calling Liam. Let's do the gala. We scheduled it for June in Boston. Liam knew event planners, and I had money. Within a week, we'd rented a venue, hired caterers, and started reaching out to potential donors. The publicity was immediate. Local news picked up the story of a trust fund helping domestic violence survivors, then regional papers, then national outlets. Vermont woman uses inheritance to help others escape abuse, read one headline. Daughter-in-law creates trust to honor mother-in-law's legacy, read another. My ex-husband's family saw the stories. Of course they did. Tabitha called from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. You're using Mom's memory to make yourself look good. This is disgusting. You're profiting off tragedy. I blocked the number. My father-in-law tried email. We should talk about your foundation. I have business connections who could help expand your reach. Let's meet. I forwarded it to Richard, who sent a cease and desist letter within an hour. My ex-husband showed up at the diner in Vermont. Dorothy called me immediately. There's a man here asking about you. Says he's your ex. Should I call the police? Yes. The police arrived and escorted him out. He'd violated the restraining order by being within 500 feet of my property. The judge extended the order another 2 years and added penalties for future violations. But the publicity worked. Donations poured in, small amounts from regular people, larger amounts from foundations and wealthy donors. By May, the Morrison Trust had $4.7 million in funding, enough to help hundreds of women. The gala sold out 3 weeks before the event. 300 people, mostly women, would gather to support the trust and hear stories from survivors we'd helped. Liam called it our coming out party. This makes it real. This makes it permanent. I know. Are you ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The night before the gala, I watched video 4. Mom was in hospice this time, barely able to sit up. Her voice was weak, but her message was strong. Milestone 4. The gala. Making it public. I'm so proud of you for being brave. She coughed. I want to tell you what happened after I left your father-in-law. I was 68 years old, no career, no recent work experience. Everyone said I was too old to start over, that I should have stayed and made the best of it. But I got a studio apartment, got a part-time job at an art supply store, started painting again for the first time in 40 years. And you know what? I was happier than I'd been in decades. Poor, but happy. She smiled weakly. That's when I realized I'd wasted so much time being afraid. Afraid to leave, afraid to be alone, afraid to start over. All those years, I could have been free. Don't waste time being afraid. Take risks, make mistakes, live loudly. The people who love you will support it. The people who don't matter. She looked directly at the camera. I wish I could be at your gala. I wish I could see what you've built, but I'll be there in spirit, probably causing trouble. You know me. The video ended with her laughing, then coughing. I cried for an hour. Then I got dressed for the gala. The event was beautiful. Liam had transformed the venue with lights and flowers and Mom's paintings. We'd borrowed them from Vermont, hung them throughout the space. People moved from painting to painting, reading the small plaques that explained who Patricia Morrison was. Artist, mother-in-law, survivor, visionary. 3 women we'd helped spoke about their experiences. One had left with 2 children and $200 in cash. Another had escaped with just her dog. The third had been planning to leave for 15 years before she finally got the resources to do it. Their stories were devastating and hopeful. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the microphone and looked out at 300 faces. My mother-in-law used to say that the hardest part about helping someone is waiting for them to be ready to accept help. She waited 8 years for me to be ready. I told them about the recordings, the inheritance, the way Mom had planned everything down to the smallest detail. I told them about the Vermont property and the paintings and the 4 video messages I'd received. She taught me that freedom isn't just about leaving. It's about building something new, something that honors who you really are instead of who someone else wants you to be. I paused. The Morrison Trust isn't about revenge or anger. It's about giving women what my mother-in-law gave me. Options. The option to leave, the option to start over, the option to say, I deserve better, and actually have the resources to pursue better. The applause was thunderous. We raised $1.3 million that night, enough to help another 100 women. After the gala, Liam and I sat in the empty venue, surrounded by dirty dishes and wilting flowers. We did it, he said. Mom did it. We're just following her plan. No, you're exceeding her plan. She'd be amazed. I looked at Mom's paintings hanging on the walls, at the beauty she'd created in the brief moments she'd been free. I hope so. June became July. The Morrison Trust was featured in national publications. We started getting applications from women across the country, from Canada, from the UK. The need was overwhelming. We hired staff, a case manager to review applications, an attorney to handle legal paperwork, a financial advisor to manage distributions. The small operation I'd started in Vermont had become a real organization. On July 15th, exactly 1 year after I'd arrived in Vermont, I finally watched video 5. Mom was unconscious in this one, or mostly unconscious. Someone else was holding the camera. A nurse, maybe. Mom's eyes flickered open. Final milestone, she whispered. 1 year of freedom. Are you happy? She didn't wait for an answer. She knew she'd be gone by the time I saw this. I hope you found joy. Real joy. Not the fake happiness you performed during your marriage, but actual contentment. I hope you wake up grateful instead of anxious. I hope you take up space instead of shrinking. I hope you're loud and messy and unapologetically yourself. Her eyes closed. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. Healing takes time. Building a new life takes time. Learning to trust yourself again takes time. Be patient with yourself. I wasn't patient enough with myself. I waited until I was dying to start living. Don't make that mistake. Live now, today, every day. Fall in love with your life instead of just surviving it. She was quiet for so long I thought the video had ended. Then she opened her eyes one more time. Thank you for loving me, for seeing me, for being the daughter I didn't know I needed. You saved me at the end. You gave me purpose. You reminded me that I was more than my mistakes. I hope I did the same for you. The video ended. I sat on the porch in the rocking chair, watching the sunset over the mountains. A year ago, I'd been driving away from my husband's funeral reception, terrified and furious. Now I was sitting on property that had been in my mother-in-law's family for 4 generations, running a foundation that would help thousands of women, living a life I'd built exactly the way I wanted. Was I happy? Yes. But more than that, I was free. My phone rang. Liam, hey, are you okay? You've been quiet today. I watched the last video. From Patricia? Yeah. What did she say? I looked out at the creek, the mountains, the fireflies beginning to emerge. She asked if I was happy. Are you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Getting there, I said finally. Definitely getting there. Good. You want to grab dinner sometime this week? Not about the trust, just as friends. I smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. After we hung up, I pulled out the letter Mom had written, the one I'd been carrying around for a year, read it one more time. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't need it anymore. I knew what she'd wanted to tell me. I'd lived it. Freedom wasn't just about money or distance from toxic people. It was about waking up every day and choosing yourself, choosing joy, choosing growth, choosing to believe you deserved more than scraps. Mom had given me that choice, and I'd taken it. Now I was giving that choice to others. One woman at a time, one trust distribution at a time, one step toward freedom at a time. The Morrison Trust would continue long after I was gone. It would help women I'd never meet, in situations I'd never fully understand. But they'd all have one thing in common. Someone had believed they deserved better, just like Mom had believed in me. I walked back inside and looked at the paintings covering my walls, at the colors and chaos and beauty Mom had created in the brief windows of her life when she'd been free. Then I pulled out a canvas I'd bought weeks ago but been too afraid to touch. If Mom could be an artist, so could I. I dipped my brush in blue paint, her favorite color, and made the first mark. It was messy, imperfect, exactly right. By midnight, I had a painting, Not good, but mine. Wholly and completely mine. I signed it at the bottom, not with my married name or even my maiden name, just my first name. Free. The word looked right on the canvas. I hung it next to Mom's paintings. They'd be kind to each other, I thought. The art of women who'd learned too late that they'd always had permission to take up space. But late was better than never, and never was no longer an option.